Boy, has news broken today that could impact not only the Big 12, but all of college football and college sports as a whole. And it's related to conference realignment and the stability or non stability of the ACC. We're going to talk about that in this episode today and how it could impact the Big 12. And could the Big 12 benefit from this? We're going to talk about all that in today's episode of Couz's Corner, and we're going to have that conversation. I'll give you my thoughts on it right after this word from one of my sponsors. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident, are fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up, and welcome into this episode of Couz's Corner. Let's go ahead and dive right into the show. According to an article by David Hale over at ESPN, Clemson has signed a 12-year scheduling agreement with Notre Dame. That's right, a 12-year scheduling agreement. They will play Notre Dame every single year up through, I think, the year's 2038. Well, as part of that article, there's also some comments in there about the ACC conference as a whole and why Dan Radakovich, the Miami AD, could potentially be basically threatening a death blow to the conference. And I'll explain why it's a death blow in just a minute. According to an article by David Hale over at ESPN, and I'll go ahead and pull that up on the screen for you. It says Clemson and Notre Dame are set to announce a 12-year scheduling agreement that will run from 2027 to 2038, pitting the two national brands against each other annually. It's a boon to Clemson with new brand-based revenue distribution in ACC. And it also, he didn't mention this in the tweet, I'm sure it's in the article, it will also help Notre Dame because Notre Dame wants to solidify their position as a football independent. And in order to do that, they have to keep their value. They have to keep their TV partner, NBC, happy. And by bringing more games with Clemson to that network, it's going to help. Now, this agreement supersedes their agreement with the ACC, where the ACC deal where Notre Dame has to play 5 ACC teams a year. This supersedes that. So even if Clemson would leave the ACC, this deal would remain in place. So even if Clemson's able to get out of the ACC and go to the SEC or the Big Ten, they will still honor this agreement with Notre Dame. So it's actually a really good move for both schools. Notre Dame is obviously one of the most valuable brands in college football. I would argue a top 2 with them and Ohio State. And they are able to get them on their schedule. Now, when you talk about, the ACC, we recently heard about them with this, as part of the settlement with Florida State and Clemson. Part of that agreement was to give those schools more games every year with Notre Dame. Notre Dame will now be playing Clemson, Florida State, and or Miami, at least one of those teams every single year. Likely be playing 2 of them every single year. Now that they've locked Clemson down every year, they're likely going to be playing Clemson and either Miami or Florida State, more than likely. They'll be playing 2 of those 3 teams every single year in most cases. And that is going to impact the rest of the teams in the ACC because that means they'll get to play Notre Dame less because there are obviously only so many games to go around. And when you look at it from the ACC standpoint, it's hurting those lower tier, what I'll call the lower tier brands like the Wake Forest, the Boston Colleges of the world, the Syracuses. It's going to hurt them because it's less games. And with this new ACC deal where conference or brand value and TV network or TV revenue, rather, TV viewership is going to be part of the equation when deciding who gets what piece of the revenue or how much percentage. It's going to hurt those schools. It's going to help your upper tier schools and hurt the lower tier schools. This is going to make that even harder for those teams to get games now that they've locked Clemson in for a game a year. As we go through this tweet thread here, and again, I'm also going to put a link to this article in the description box, but most of the high points of this article he touches here in this tweet thread. But it says, and by the way, Friend of the show, Greg Flugard, covered this on his show already today. College football's pick around the corner. It goes on to say, no one I've talked to thinks the SEC ACC rivalry games are going to go away, but there is concern about non-rivalry games between the two conferences as SEC considers 9-game conference slate. The Notre Dame agreement is very good insurance for Clemson, who has UGA and Oklahoma 6 times in the next 12 years. So basically, your Clemson South Carolina game likely not going to go away. Your Florida State game likely not going to go away. But you may see other SEC, ACC games go away, and you may even see SEC Big 12 games go away. For example, West Virginia has Alabama on their schedule in 2026 and 2027. I think there's a high likelihood that game ends up being scrapped once the SEC goes to a 9-game conference schedule, because they're going to have to replace a game on their schedule with another SEC game. And you don't want to, they're not going to want to replace their FCS or Group of 5 game, right? Because those are automatic wins on your schedule. It's games where you can give some of your starters a breather in some cases. They're not going to want to replace those with SEC game, or those games with the SEC game. They're going to replace games against Power 4 teams. So they will likely, the West Virginia game will likely get taken off the schedule, but it's going to affect all teams in both the ACC and Big 12 that don't have rivals in the SEC or Big 10, SEC specifically in this case. And in Dan Radakovich, the AD at Miami, he goes on, he has some further comments, which is really the crux of this video today. Miami AD Dan Radakovich said that with FSU and VT annually on their schedule, they probably won't try to play Notre Dame every year, but would like to play more often. Also said if SEC goes to 9-game slate, he thinks ACC will need to follow suit. Again, makes sense. There are less games to go around, so you have to add a conference game to make up for it. It's also more games for your network partners. And then here's the part I really, really want to focus on here. It says, interestingly, Radakovich, again, the Miami AD, suggests if the ACC does go to 9 conference games, breaking into divisions based on brands could be a path forward. Quote, if the SEC goes to 9, we might have to go to 9 as well, with a bifurcated brands and non-brands divide, end quote. So basically what Dan Radakovich is recommending here publicly now, he put this out publicly. Keep that in mind. This is a power play by Miami, in my opinion. Dan Radakovich this is a very strong negotiating tactic, and I think it's a darn good one. But he's basically saying, look, SEC is going to go to 9 conference games. That's less non-conference games available for our ACC teams. Therefore, we need to look at going to 9 conference games as well. It would also get you in line with the other Power 4 conferences. Big 12's already doing 9. Big 10's already doing 9. So if the SEC goes to 9, you don't want to be the only one doing 8. It's not good for your conference or for your strength of scheduling, things like that. And also, your TV partners may not like it. But another piece of that is, in order to bring more value to those teams, to the quote unquote upper tier teams in the ACC, the higher branded or higher value schools, he's recommending that you divide it into divisions based on brand value. So, for example, you would have Clemson, Florida State, Miami, probably North Carolina, all in the same division, which means they would play each other every year, which means that ACC agreement where you get more high-value games with the upper brands playing each other more often, they're going to play each other now every single year, which means they're only going to be playing the quote-unquote lower brands about twice a season, which means the lower-tier brands or the less valuable brands are going to have to play each other more frequently, which means they're going to get, as the way Greg Flugard put it, they're going to get buried in the ACC. They're never going to have a chance to increase their value to get into that conversation about making a higher percentage of the conference revenue. They're going to be playing lower Notre Dame less already, which is going to hurt their TV viewership. Now they're not going to be able to play Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and the other top brands as much as they used to either. So Wake Forest is going to have to play Boston College every year, and probably Syracuse every year, and Pitt every year. And those games are not going to move the needle like games against Clemson and Miami and Notre Dame and Florida State. The needle mover games are going to be few and far between for the lower branded teams in the ACC. So it's almost like you're relegating them without officially relegating them. You're basically telling them, look, you're not good enough to be in our club. So you got to be over here in this club. Now we'll play you once in a while. We'll let you play us once in a while just to try to keep you happy. But other than that, you just go over here and play in your own sandbox. Man, I just don't like this, man. College football, college sports has become an absolute crap show. And I'm trying to keep it clean here. I just don't like it, man. This is not what college sports is supposed to be. Now, I don't blame these institutions necessarily. They're doing what they have to do to survive and try to stay competitive. It's an every man for himself, dog eat dog world out there in college sports. Institutions have to look out for themselves. I get it. But I don't like it. I hate it. It sucks. And these ACC teams are going to be buried, and it's going to be very, very hard for them to get out of the bottom. Now, how will it impact the Big 12? Let's go there now. Before we do, though, I do want to give a shout out to another channel sponsor here on the channel, our good friends over at Elite Scuba and Adventures. Right now, Elite Scuba and Adventures offers discount if you use Couz code Couz code 25 at checkout. You get a 5% discount on any of their services. They also offer a 10% discount to all first responders and veterans. So you can take advantage of that too if you fit that category. But Elite Scuba Adventures, you can check them out at elitescubaadventures.com. Also check them out at all the social media platforms. They offer a lot of different services. They have PADI Discover diving, open water certifications, advanced diver and specialty courses, including dive master certifications. They do a lot of different diving trips to Thailand, to Key West and other great places. So if you want to support them, if you're into scuba diving or want to learn how to scuba dive, go to elitescubaadventures.com and check out our good friends over at Elite Scuba and thank them for supporting what I'm doing here at Couz's Corner. Now, let's go ahead and move on with the show. The Big 12, if this drives a further wedge, I've told you on the show many a time, I've got a source that has been sharing information with me from one of his sources close to the situation who's very tied into what's going on with the ACC. And he's telling me this settlement agreement and all this did not keep the ACC happy, right? It was basically a temporary Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And to quote the great Morgan Wallen song, it's a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And it's not keeping anybody happy. It might keep Clemson happy. It might keep Miami happy. It might keep Florida State happy, at least in the interim until they leave and go to the Power 2. But what's it doing for the likes of a Louisville and a Pitt and a Virginia Tech and a UVA and a Georgia Tech and an NC State and Wake Forest, and Boston College and SMU and Stanford and Cal? What's it doing for them? Not much. As a matter of fact, it could be hurting them. And how can the Big 12 benefit? Well, can the Big 12 benefit by saying, okay, look, you want to come to a conference who will treat you equally because we don't really have any brands that are, what I'll call blue bloods or upper tier brands. We don't have any of the super high value brands in our league anyway. Now, we do have brands that are good brands, solid brands. We've got the West Virginias, the Utahs, the Arizonas. I could name every team in the league. So I'm not going to I don't want to leave anybody out. But we do BYU. There are great, solid brands, but they're not, when you look at TV viewership and things like that, they're all pretty equal for the most part, with a few exceptions. Now, if you come to our league, we're going to treat you like one of us because you are one of us. You're one of our equals. You'll get the same payout as everybody else. We're not going to try to relegate you to another division. If we do divisions, it might be based on, geography or whatever. And again, this is just me. If I was the Brett Yormark in the Big 12, this is what I would be saying to these ACC schools. You come to our conference, we will take care of you. We're not going to treat you like the quote-unquote redheaded stepchild, to use a metaphor. And maybe that entices them. Here's the thing. Financially, how can any of these teams afford to pay $175 million buyout of the ACC just to come to the Big 12 and make basically the same money? I just don't think they could, at least not in the short term. And even if they can do it in, once that buyout decreases every year, once they get closer to that 2029, 2030 time frame, maybe then you do it. But by then you've been buried for so long, you might be making 10, 12, 15 million a year in revenue every year because you're not getting the TV viewership, because you're not getting to play Notre Dame and Clemson and Florida State and Miami. So you're not getting TV viewership. Therefore, you're not making enough of the TV revenue. Therefore, you're never able to compete. So what happens to you in that 4 or 5 year interim? How can you even afford to pay the $20 million in house settlement money with that kind of revenue coming in? Is this a way for Miami and Florida State and Clemson to basically kick these other schools out of the ACC? Or it's a way to say, hey, this is what we want. You're going to give us this, or we're going to leave and go to the Power 2. And if you're Miami and you think you might have a home in the Big Ten, or if you're Florida State Clemson, you think you might have a home in the SEC, you're UNC, and it's rumored that they could go to either one, whichever one they choose. If you're those schools and you have options, you can play hardball. You can lay down the gauntlet. You can say, hey, you give us what we want right now. You give us this deal where we divide the league into 2 divisions based on brand value, or we're out. And you leave these other schools with very few options because they can't afford to pay $170 million to get out. But yet if they get stuck at the bottom of the ACC, how are they going to afford to pay the house settlement money? How can they afford to pay their student athletes? Which means they'll never be able to compete, which means they'll continue to stay at the bottom because they won't make the CFP, because they won't be competitive. They won't be getting TV viewership because they're not getting to play the top brands. It's a never-ending cycle. Now, here's the only 2 ways. If I'm these schools, if I'm the lower tier schools in the ACC, here's the only 2 ways that I think I agree to this. A, it's a model where if you do happen to win, it's a relegation model. You can play your way into that upper tier division. Maybe you lock Florida State, Clemson, Miami, maybe you lock those 3 schools into that division. But everybody else has to play their way in. Maybe you do it that way. Or maybe everybody has to play their way in. I don't know. There's more than one way to do it. The other thing I would demand, or at least ask for, if I'm one of those lower value schools, or schools with lower, I hate using lower value because it makes it sound like I'm taking shots. I'm not taking shots. I'm just talking about TV viewership, brand value based on perception, right? And perception's reality in this case. But if I'm one of the schools who don't get as much TV viewership, I'm also saying, hey, if we do this division thing, the winner of the division gets a CFP spot once they go to automatic qualifiers. That's another way you help yourself out. You make sure that you get paid that $6 million a year or whatever it is the ACC teams make for going to the CFP. Also, if you go into the CFP, it helps your brand, which could help recruiting. And if you tie it into the relegation piece, maybe it also automatically means you get into the upper tier division the next season. So I'm saying, hey, if we're going to do this, I want some concessions. You're going to give the winner of this division an automatic qualifier to the CFP because you're not going to give all the CFP spots to one division every year. That ain't going to happen. We get a CFP spot. If the ACC gets 2 automatic qualifiers, the winner of that division gets one of them. I'm asking for that. And I'm also asking, hey, our teams get a chance to play their way into that other division. Those are the 2 things I'm asking for if I'm Wake Forest or Boston College or Pitt or one of those teams who likely have no shot at getting in the tier based on TV viewership and brand value. I think that's the only way this works for those schools that doesn't bury all of them. Now, there's a whole new conversation. I may do a whole video if I have time on what, if they do divide into divisions, what schools are in which division. I mean, there are obviously some that are obvious, but who else is in that? Who is with Florida State, Clemson, and Miami in that upper tier or name brand division? I think that's up for debate. And there are a lot of different ways you could look at it. If you base it strictly on TV viewership, do you look at success? Do you look at overall brand value? What do you look at? What are your metrics? I think that's a topic that I could do a whole video on, and I'm hoping to do that soon. But I think this is very intriguing. Could the Big 12 capitalize on this and snag a few of these Big 12 teams? Maybe the teams like Louisville continue to be unhappy with how everything's shaken out. And they want to look at a league that's not going to treat them like a lesser than. And we've also, we know that the Big 12 is looking at private capital, private equity. Maybe a private capital firm comes in and pays the freight to get some of these ACC teams into the Big 12, which will enhance or expand their markets, and also might make the league more valuable once they do get to 2030, 2031 and negotiating that new TV deal. I want to know what you think about this whole situation. Let me know in the comments what you think about the ACC potentially dividing up into two divisions based on brand value, and what you think about Clemson getting this 12-year scheduling agreement with Notre Dame. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I want to take this opportunity to give a shout out to my VIP channel members of this episode. If you want to be a VIP member, you can do so by hitting the join button below, or going over to my channel homepage and hitting the join button there. It's right beside my profile picture. But the random VIP shout outs of this episode are Big Dan T, Dane the Surveyor, West Virginia Wildman 82, Hellbilly, and Appalachia Africa Twin. Thank you all for your support and helping me keep the lights on. Also, thanks to my sponsors, Cat's Counter, Stone Street Buckner, Elite Scuba and Adventures, and the folks right here at Appalachia Digital. They are the designers of my brand new website, wvsportschat.com. Please go check them out at appalachiadigital.com/Couz. I want to thank you for supporting the show. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. Hope the rest of your day is top shelf. God bless, and Q Country Roads.